Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me to Soulmate Magnetizing Secrets. This is a video series that I've created to help you understand how to magnetize to your soulmate. This is part one, where we are going to be talking about what may be blocking your soulmate. I'm Cynthia Clark, intuitive life coach and hand analyst and tarot expert. You can find me over at soulmate.support. So I'm going to identify 4 ways in which you may be blocking your soulmate relationship. The first way is that you might not actually be ready for your soulmate. Okay, now this can occur in any number of ways, but you can identify this actually in your hands to tell if you're ready or not. And it's going to be located in your affection lines. Your affection lines are located just underneath your little finger. And I've got a diagram here so that you can see right here. They're going to be these little horizontal lines. There's probably only going to be 1, 2, or 3 of these lines. It's uncommon to see more than that. You want to look at the uppermost line, the one that's closest to your little finger. That is going to show your readiness or not for your soulmate. If you're ready, the line will be short and straight. Okay, it will just barely jut out into your palm, and it won't curve and it won't split. It won't be too long. Those are some of the ways that you can see if you're not ready. Okay, so check that line on your hand and just see what it's doing. Okay, the next thing that you may be blocking your soulmate with is that you may be insecure. And this is actually one way that I was blocking my soulmate for a while. After I got divorced, I went through a period of huge emotional insecurity, and I felt pretty worthless. Now, this can show up in a couple of different ways in the hands. Okay, so the first way is just to identify if your Jupiter finger is weak, which is your index finger. Okay, now it's going to be weak if it's short relative to your ring finger. Okay, so I'm going to show that to you on an actual hand. Right here, you can see this is a pretty short Jupiter finger compared to that ring finger. When you draw a line just going straight across, you can see, whew, man, that's short. Okay, so that's one way insecurity can show up. Another way is also on this Jupiter finger if the zone of boundaries is weak. And that can show up in the lower section of Jupiter. We call this the phalange. So the lower Jupiter phalange is actually going to be smaller relative to the other phalanges. Okay, so if that section is small, that's a sure sign that you're not standing up for yourself, and this is a state of insecurity. The third way to tell about insecurity is what we call wasting, and that's when all of the fingers, they actually look like they cinch in. So instead of being solid and straight like this, you see like a little indentation on both sides. So it almost looks like somebody took a belt to the finger and they cinched it in. Okay, so that's called wasting, and that's going to show up, if it shows up on Jupiter, definitely, but it may also show up on any of the other fingers. So again, looking at this example, you can see this person has wasting pretty much on every finger except for the little finger. Okay. So the third way that you may be blocking your soulmate relationship is that you may have emotional detachment. Okay, so you may just be putting your guard up, putting your walls up. This is really not a good thing, and it's probably going to be showing up in your heart line. Okay, so we're going to look at this heart line. Okay, now your heart line, we've talked about this in some of my other videos. It's the uppermost line in your hand. It's a major line. Starts at the edge of the hand, underneath the little finger, and it heads up either towards your middle finger or your index finger. And so when this is a broken line, you're actually going to see kind of this floating line up above it, okay? And this is actually not that uncommon, but it's showing an emotional disconnect, okay? Anytime there's a break in a line, it's showing a disconnect in some way. So this would be an emotional disconnect. And it's definitely a form of blocking your soulmate. Now, it doesn't mean that this line can't change. In fact, all of these markers can change over time except for the length of your finger, obviously. But it can be a good way just to identify if you've got the problem. Okay, so here's an example in an actual person's hand. You can see here is their heart line here, okay, and then you see this line right up above underneath the middle finger. That's the Saturn finger, and that's the secondary heart line. Okay, so sometimes you may think that's a completely different line, but it's actually part of the heart line. Okay, and number 4 is you may be actually thinking about what you don't want to attract rather than what you do want to attract. So when this happens, and it's such an easy thing to do, you may be focusing on, well, I don't want a partner who drinks, or I don't want a partner who smokes, or I don't want him to be too short, or too tall, or too blonde, or you know, whatever it is. These are things that you see how we're focusing on the don'ts. Or we can turn it around and we can actually go, well, I always attract losers, or why do I always attract, you know, somebody who cheats on me? When you start talking in the always and never land, these are warning signs that you're actually not magnetizing to your soulmate, but you're magnetizing to the exact opposite. When you focus on what you want instead, that's going to help shift things around. But a lot of times we subconsciously just focus on what we don't want. And that's the exact opposite approach of what we need to take. So these are just 4 areas where you may be blocking your soulmate. The good news is we can shift that around, and in the next video we're going to actually be doing an attunement to magnetize to your soulmate. So stay tuned for video 2. I'm Cynthia Clark. Thank you so much for joining me today.